We are back yet again on the Thick Meaning podcast, and this week we've got takes which are hitting harder than Will Smith. Man, that joke is applicable right now and probably not in the distant future. I'm sure many viewers down the line will not appreciate it to its full fruition. But we have decided to take a look back on the offseason so far. And right now things have settled down, moves have been made, trades have been done, and now all that's left is a draft. So we are going to look at the biggest winners and losers of the offseason so far, and there are a few people I want to mention who didn't quite make either list for the biggest winner or the biggest loser. Just three teams looking to it. One, the Eagles got two new tight ends, re-signed all their talents. They look like they're going to be a little bit better next year. Next, you've got the Bills, Von Miller, meaningful acquisition, overpaid certainly, but that's a long-term problem and we're in a short-term league. And finally, the Jets, they signed all their talent, which is actually good. They're shoring up the offensive line, and they got Michael LaFleur, who will be a tremendous boost to the young Zach Wilson. But I want to touch on an overhyped team. And casual fans are drastically overhyping the Bengals offseason so far. Surely, they signed three new offensive linemen, but those three aren't exactly world beaters. Ted Karras is an average guard at best and a below average center. Alex Kappa was the most overrated guard in the entire free agency class. He let Tom Brady, the quarterback with arguably the best pocket presence of all time, get sacked 5 times last year. The human turnstile, Jonah Williams, is still going to be blocking Burrow's blindside at left tackle. And finally, a touch on Leo Collins. That was by far their best acquisition. He is very solid, but he plays right tackle, and they paid a lot for him. Bit of an overpay, in my opinion, for the second most important offensive line position. He's getting close to left tackle money. But to act like the Bengals team suddenly has an elite or even good offensive line is comical. This group is at best average and will still be eaten alive by elite pass rushers. Bengals fans, I love you, but the clock has struck midnight. You guys aren't going back to the Super Bowl, and you might not even win your division.
Well, Bengals fans in general need to swallow a bit of a reality pill when it just comes to their defensive side of the ball, because while they have a very solid defense, coming back to their division next year, Lamar Jackson is going to be healthy. The Ravens team is going to be healthy in general. That offense is going to have J.K. Dobbins back. There's some receivers that struggle with injury on their team too, I believe. The Steelers are going to be better. They'll have a quarterback that can hopefully push the ball down the field in Mitch Trubisky. And Cleveland, we don't know what's going on with Deshaun Watson, but their team struggled a lot with injury last year as well. Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, the receiving core, even though the receivers are probably going to look much different. So Cincinnati in general has a lot more competition for them this time around, just for their defense to handle, let alone worrying about the offensive additions that they've made.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit rougher in the wild AFC North. Not nearly as rough as the wild AFC West, but we'll get to the AFC West later. Now we talk about the winners of free agency. And first off, I want to start off with the team down Miami, the Dolphins. And they made the moves they needed to compete for a Super Bowl. Sadly, they still appear to be one piece short, at least right now at the quarterback position. If Tua develops, that could very well change, but right now that is a big question mark. But they got the best offensive lineman available in free agency. A little bit of an overpay for him, but Terron Armstead, big acquisition. Tyreek Hill, most dynamic player in the NFL. He will be masterfully used by Mike McDaniel. Will get the ball far more, just not receive it deep as much. Then you've got Raheem Morstead, a little comfort piece for McDaniel from the San Francisco 49ers offense. And finally, Connor Williams, one of the best guards in the class and someone who's really going to shore up the weak side of that offensive line. They have made these moves while retaining the entirety of their defense, something which very few people expected, and now they are set to compete in the AFC. Will they make the playoffs? It's hard to say. The AFC is really, really good this year, maybe the best we've ever seen it be. But I think they're going to finish second in their division behind the Bills, obviously. I don't think the Patriots are going to be much of a threat, and I like the Jets this offseason, but they're still not quite there yet. I think they're definitely a double-digit win team based off these moves alone.
Well, while the Dolphins have made a lot of moves this offseason to get better as a roster, especially on the offensive side of the ball, I do not necessarily think it's going to move their win total as much just as because of who they have at quarterback. The Bills are still going to be a better team because they have Josh Allen at quarterback. Their defense is going to improve with Von Miller and pieces that they're probably going to add in the draft and moving forward. The Jets will hopefully be better. You never know with them and what they seem to try and do every offseason. And then with the Patriots, I think there's a real possibility they're still better because it's going to be year 2 of Mac Jones. Hopefully they add some receivers in the draft. I know Bill Belichick struggles with that. They got better. I just don't think they're one of the 3 biggest winners from this offseason. I'm assuming we're doing 3. I don't know how many you did. At number 3 for me, one of the biggest winners from this offseason, and you're going to notice a trend when I give all of mine, is I think the Broncos come in at 3 for me. They went from Drew Lock being the quarterback to Russell Wilson. That is like going from a Nissan Cube to a Corvette. I am not the biggest fan of the Broncos receiving core, and I think Broncos fans hype up Jerry Jeudy to a point where they give him unrealistic unrealistic expectations and set him up for failure in the eyes of the public. And it would be nice for Russell Wilson to have some more viable receiving options there. But I cannot deny the win it is for them to get Russell Wilson as their quarterback. On top of that, they already had an elite defense, added Randy Gregory to that pass rush rotation. They have done everything in their power to make themselves relevant after winning 7 games last season. And while I do think it is a little bit delusional of Broncos fans to think they're all of a sudden the best team in the AFC West, I can't deny how much they've improved due to the trade that they made.
But yes, the Broncos got better. I'll touch on them a little bit later. But right now is a wonderful time in football. Obviously, you've got all the talent in the AFC, but the GOAT has come back. He has touched back down in Tampa Bay, and he's taken the Buccaneers from a team which looked like they were going to tank. They were going to lose all their veteran free agents. Their talent didn't want to come back and play for Barbarians, to a team which very well might make another Super Bowl given the weakness of the NFC at this current moment in time. Like, it's the Buccaneers, the Rams, and really very few other teams. Packers are not a threat for losing their best receiver. So by getting Tom Brady back out of retirement, the Buccaneers became one of my big winners of free agency, because technically Brady retired while the season was going on. Thank you, Schefter, for breaking that news. But Brady came back. He brought the receivers back. Godwin re-signed. Gronk's going to be back. The defensive side of the ball got shored up. They lost a little bit on the offensive line, but they're still a very good team, and they were facing down a complete rebuild. Now they're facing down a Super Bowl run. So just to go from that to that, two polar options, I got them as one of my big winners of the offseason.
I can see how you think they're a winner, but when you come to directly comparing it to last year's roster, I do not necessarily think they're a big winner because they didn't improve at any position. They didn't have any big time acquisitions except for the receiver from the Falcons. I can't think of the name off the top of my head right now. He's not going to move the needle for them when it comes to making a run at the Super Bowl. Every NFC team is a winner because there's been so much talent that's moved to the AFC, and there's not going to be a lot of teams competing at the top of that conference to make the playoffs. So on that front, the Buccaneers are definitely a winner.
Oh, there's certainly one loser in the NFC, and I'm very sure we both agree on who that is. Finally, I want to touch on my final winner, and I'll be honest, I cheated a little bit. It's a bit unfair to the young fella over here. He was not expecting this. My third winner is the entire AFC West with the exception of the Kansas City Chiefs. And Tristan already touched on this, and he'll talk more in depth, but real quick spark notes here. One, the Chiefs got worse. That's a big deal, which people don't talk about in addition to the acquisitions of free agency. But the Raiders got Devontae Adams, best wide receiver in football, paired with his old college roommate. Chargers got Khalil Mack and J.C. Jackson for pennies on the dollar while re-signing Mike Williams, and the Broncos, as Tristan already mentioned, Russell Wilson and Randy Gregory. Although Gregory may be an issue with his health and off-field issues. That division became an arms race. It is insane how much talent is in that one collection of 4 teams, and I think this is by far the best division in football, maybe the best division we have ever seen, and it's almost entirely due to this year's free agency. It's really something special. So get a little bit more in depth, Tristan. Talk about the remaining 2 teams from the AFC West.
Well, at 2-1, the biggest winners of the offseason for me, coming in at number 2, I have the Oakland Raiders, and at 1, I obviously have the Chargers slightly ahead of them. The Raiders were watching the Chargers and Broncos get markedly better. People were then writing the Raiders off as the worst team in the division. At the time, Tyreek Hill was still on the Chiefs, but now after big splash moves and getting Devontae Adams, signing Chandler Jones, the Raiders have the best offensive weapons in the division with Tyreek Hill leaving, and they have maybe the best pass rush in the division. When you take a look at the Raiders offense, they have an incredible tight end in Darren Waller. Devontae Adams is the best receiver in the NFL. Hunter Renfrow was great last year in the slot, and Josh Jacobs is an extremely solid running back. The Raiders offense is going to be almost impossible to defend when everyone's healthy. Hopefully everyone stays healthy. And there's some people detracting from the Raiders offense because Derek Carr is their quarterback, but Derek Carr is more than capable of making a deep playoff run, a deep playoff push. It's not like he's a top 20 quarterback. It's not like he's number 15. He's a very solid top 12 quarterback. I'm usually more high on him than most. I understand that, but I think he's extremely capable. And then when you take a look at the defensive move of adding Chandler Jones, that was an excellent move. They understood that they're going to have to play Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Russell Wilson 6 times next season, and they went out and got another elite pass rusher to play across the formation from Max Crosby. I love the Raiders offseason, and I also just like the Raiders more in general because I'm kind of a fanboy of Darren Waller. Now, at number 1, you notice a trend here. We're talking about the AFC West. The Chargers had an amazing offseason. Their offense was phenomenal last season with Justin Herbert at the helm. They didn't need to improve much there. They retained Mike Williams, and their defense let them down time after time. Their defense was abysmal, especially in the run game, and they've done things to address that. They evaluated their weaknesses and went out, traded for Khalil Mack, one of the best edge defenders in the NFL. Shout out to Isaiah's TikTok on Khalil Khalil Mack. They signed Sebastian Joseph Day, a good defender against the run in the interior, which they had horrible interior play last season. And they went out and signed J.C. Jackson to shore up the back end of their defense to pair with Derwin James back there. The Chargers are going to be much better next season. I think all the moves they made are, I'm not going to say guaranteed because there's no guarantees in the NFL, but I think they'll finally make the playoffs with Justin Herbert as their quarterback due to all the moves they've made. They've shorn up basically all of their weaknesses, and they'll fill it out even more with their draft picks this coming draft.
The one real mystery is if J.C. Jackson works outside New England. The really elite defenders from the Patriots have a bad habit of falling flat on their face once they leave Chowderland, but hopefully it works out for him. I think J.C. Jackson is extremely talented, just needs to put it together, and the Chargers need to scheme their defense a wee bit more around him, giving him coverage as well as letting the pass rush get home. They're going to be a solid team. It's a statement how good Patrick Mahomes is, that despite all this, there's a real chance the Chiefs still win the AFC West. But let's talk about them a little bit more. Let's talk about the suffering going on in Kansas City. And Patrick Mahomes is down something dreadful. Not only did he lose his best weapon in Tyreek Hill, fastest player in football, best deep ball connection we may have ever seen, both from the quarterback and wide receiver position. Just the combination of those two together was sensational. Now, never gonna see it again. The defense also lost both their cornerbacks and the Honey Badger, which very bad sign when you have to defend Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and company. I'm not really gonna get into the Broncos fellas because they're not special, but in a gun show division, in a boat race, the Chiefs are taking on water. They've lost players. They're not getting anyone besides Juju Smith-Schuster. Their draft picks probably aren't going to pan out. And I feel bad for Mahomes, but at the same time, I am exceedingly happy the Chiefs are falling apart because it gives the Bills a much better shot at making it to the Super Bowl. The Chiefs were the team standing in everybody's way in the AFC. Now, that boogeyman appears to have been vanquished, at least for the time being.
I don't really understand how you could say the Chiefs draft picks probably won't work out when they drafted Tyreek Hill, they drafted Travis Kelce, they drafted Patrick Mahomes. All the talent that they had on their roster is talent that they drafted. So to say they can't replace some of that talent just through the draft, I feel like is a bit
yes,
that doesn't make much sense to me.
Got the first round picks, and recently they've been incredibly hit or miss. You look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he hasn't worked out. The center they drafted last year worked out, but he's also an offensive line playing the least valuable offensive line position besides maybe left guard. Like,
yeah,
once
what
Mahomes
else do they need besides a center? Then like that's a bit of a weird criticism or prediction to make of the Chiefs.
I don't think this year's draft picks are going to work out for the Chiefs. That doesn't.
You don't even know who they drafted yet.
I'm saying they're not going to work out. I don't think the Chiefs are going to make good picks this year.
Anyway, one of the biggest losers of this offseason, I already made a TikTok about them, is the Cowboys. They got rid of Amari Cooper, a top 20 receiver in the NFL. In my opinion, the best receiver on their depth chart. Didn't make much sense with the trade because they let it get out that they were thinking of releasing him to clear up cap space. But then you look at Devontae Adams, he was traded for a first and second. Tyreek Hill traded a first, second, 2 fourths, and a 6th round pick. You would think that you'd at least get a 3rd round pick for a talent such as Amari Cooper, and they were getting rid of cap space. That's the narrative when they were going to release him. That's the narrative when they traded him. But they've done nothing with that money. They didn't use it to get Randy Gregory back. They didn't use it to retain Cedric Wilson as a 3rd receiver. They didn't use it to keep their offensive line solid with La'el Collins, retaining him. And the only free agent they've added of any note is Dante Fowler, who hasn't had the most impressive career, had 1 good season with the Rams. Other than that, it's been 4-3 sacks everywhere. They have lost in general. I don't care that they're still the best team in the NFC East. I'm probably still picking them to win the division as of right now, but they've definitely been losing when it comes to the offseason.
I also have the Cowboys being the real big loser out of the NFC. All talent went west, and now they're kind of left high and dry. Their offensive line's weaker. Their skill players are weaker. Dak Prescott is going to be running for his life a lot more, and hopefully he doesn't do that when there are 11 seconds left on the clock. But you've got to ask yourselves, you think they're going to win the division? So I kind of disagree. I think the Eagles definitely got better. They got better personnel. They got better coaching staff. And I think the football team, the Commanders, got better because Carson Wentz, say what you want about him, he is going to get you more wins than Heineken Light and Ryan Fitzpatrick. So they might not win the division. I think that is going to be a fairly interesting division once again. Certainly the worst division in football for, what, the
AFC year? South. I don't know about that.
Derrick Henry and the Colts.
Yeah, but the bottom of that division is just so bad.
Well, the bottom of the NFC East is very bad too. I think you know that better than most. Finally, my biggest loser of this offseason is a team many people won't expect, because instead of going out and acquiring players or losing all their players, with one big exception, they really didn't do anything, and that is the New England Patriots. Their offensive line got weaker, but they weren't really big name players. People didn't notice their center and guard leaving. They lost J.C. Jackson, sure, but that was bound to happen eventually. The real issue is they're doing nothing to help Mac Jones. They did not learn their lesson from Cam Newton, who tried and failed New England partially due to his own very limited football skills at that point in his career, but also due to the fact that his receivers could not get open. Now, sure, they've got their tight ends still, but Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry are not exactly world-beating receiving threats. They're really, in some cases, more of run blockers, but you've got Damian Harris running the ball. Like, this is just not a dynamic offense in any way, shape, or form, and if you want Mac Jones to take a step forward, you need to give him some help, not less protection. And the real nail in the coffin for the Patriots, and why I think they are by far the biggest losers of this offseason, is the coaching acquisitions. Not only did they get infamous Giants head coach Joe Judge to come guide the poorly fated Mac Jones, they also got the infamous Matt Patricia. The fact that they brought Judge onto the roster, on the coaching staff, while a young quarterback is in the building, is a sign that Bill Belichick is losing his mind. Clearly, he did not pay attention to the fate Daniel Jones suffered in the Big Apple, or the Big Jersey. That poor young man, who admittedly very limited talent, had his career ruined by Joe Judge. He's trying to fight his way back into relevance now. But you want Joe Judge as far away from your young quarterback as possible. If I was Bill Belichick, I would have booked Joe Judge a flight to California myself. I would pay for his house. He can live in the nicest apartment in all of LA for all I care. Just keep him away from Mac Jones. Instead, he brought him on the staff. Mac Jones' career is going to be ruined based off this offseason coaching hire. I feel bad for the guy, but Belichick should know better. The old man is going senile.
Well, Joe Judge isn't the quarterback coach. He's not the offensive coordinator, so you are greatly overstating.
In the building, Tristan. The mere aura of Joe Judge is a negative aura. You know this better than me. This is possibly worse than bringing McAdoo into the organization.
I don't know about that. I don't think the Patriots aren't some of the biggest losers of the offseason, because they didn't lose. Well, they did lose J.C. Jackson, which is a major loss for their defense, but they still have Bill Belichick. They still have the whole Patriot way.
Play?
He's the coach. We're talking about coaches. He's the most important one. So that's kind of what position does he play? They're the Patriots. They're going to be good next season, and they're going to compete within their division. There's an individual player I want to talk about when it comes to being a massive loser this offseason, and that player is Justin Fields, a player that is also near and dear to my heart. The Bears organization are trying to ruin his career at this point. They're not doing anything to help him. The Bears lost Allen Robinson in free agency because Nagy effectively refused to incorporate him into the offense last season, into his scheme. The offensive scheme was terrible, and now you take a look at who the Bears are putting around Justin Fields. The only decent receiving threat they have is Darnell Mooney, who I think is a good receiver. I'd even say he can be an elite receiver, but I also think that some people sometimes convince themselves that he's better than he actually is. And when you look at the supporting cast receivers around Darnell Mooney and the other receivers Justin Fields has to throw to, it's Byron Pringle and Equanimeous St. Brown. Those are not two elite receivers. I don't even know if those are two good to solid receivers. Justin Fields is only going to have Mooney to throw to. Cole Kmet is the tight end who may not even be a top 15 tight end in the NFL. And the offensive line, which was one of the worst in the NFL last season, they've done nothing to shore up that offensive line. And they don't even have a first round pick this year because they traded it over to the Giants. So I'm still incredibly frustrated that the Giants were not the ones to draft Justin Fields. And I'm having to watch one of my favorite players that I watched in college football. I barely watch college football. This is basically the only player I've ever watched playing college football for the most part, on a consistent basis, I should say. And now I have to watch him rot on the Bears. Truly upsetting. Justin Fields stays losing.
Well, Justin, or as I like to call him, Bustin' Fields, is not exactly in a great spot. I'd agree with you. In terms of individual quarterbacks, I think the argument is clearly there that Baker Mayfield is by far the biggest loser because he's going to be unemployed very soon. Justin Fields at least is still getting that paycheck, although I think contracts are guaranteed, so hey. But Mooney can be a very good receiver. It's hard to say what the other threats are going to be like, but to act like Fields has no responsibility, no issues is a bit absurd. You're acting like this is an Andrew Luck situation. There's a reason Justin Fields fell in the draft. He's got athletic ability. He's got a giant arm. Well, not a giant arm in the NFL, a very good arm. But the accuracy is a concern. The decision making is a concern, and he needs to sort that out. Hopefully, he can get that sorted out with Everflus, or however you say that stupid name. Maybe not, but right now, his career is very much on his shoulders to decide. Eventually, he will be free. He will have the opportunity to go pursue a better job. He might even go down the Mitch Trubisky route of getting a backup job on a good team. Maybe even the Bills, getting a year under his belt in a new system, then testing the market in a presumably weak quarterback class.
You just mentioned his arm. He does have one of the stronger arms in the NFL. I think you're taking away from it a little bit too much.
Yeah, but
he had some of the most completions, over 20 yards last season, and that is actually one of the parts of his games, besides running the football, that looked the best. So, that's also another weird criticism.
I agree that he's got a good arm, but at the same time, you are never going to think of Justin Fields in the same breadth as guys like Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen. Those are the giant arms in the NFL. Those are the historically great arms. And while he's got a good arm, sure, it's just not that.
Well, we both agree that he's been a big loser. He's rotting on the Bears. And
we both agree he's been a big loser. That feels like a personal attack. Rephrase that, man. Justin Fields is sitting alone at home playing League of Legends all offseason.
He's been a big loser because of what the organization has done to him. And you just mentioned Aaron Rodgers. My final loser of this offseason is the Green Bay Packers. They are some of the biggest losers in the NFL, even though they have the back-to-back MVP on their roster. They have zero cap flexibility to actually improve their roster. They were just forced to trade Devontae Adams. They lost Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And now, after that, the receivers are Allen Lazard and old Randall Cobb and Amari Rodgers, who totaled 4 receptions last year. What is Aaron Rodgers going to do to push the ball down the field with those receivers there? There's not much of a deep threat lying around. Aaron Rodgers is going to learn real quick what it was like in New England at the end of Brady's career to throw to no one. The Packers need to hit on at least one receiver in this year's draft, and they better hope that Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon can shoulder the load in the run game, and they also better hope that Aaron Rodgers doesn't have a change of heart midway through the season because of how bad his receivers are and just retires. So I think the Packers are the biggest losers this offseason, in my opinion.
You really think the Packers are going to hit on a receiver? Come on, man. You know better. We all know better. They're not going to hit on a receiver. But there's this promising kid from Nevada. Big guy. Huge frame. 6'3", 225, 230. Tremendous athletic talent. Huge arm too. I think his name's Carson Strong. That is going to be the first pick in the draft this year for Green Bay. They might even trade up to get him. If they somehow dig up a guy who runs a 4.3 and Rodgers can connect with deep, it'll be very good for him. But I agree, Aaron Rodgers is a loser for a wide variety of reasons. I don't think it's for the same reasons as Justin Fields. They're more him being an actual loser as opposed to Fields having a bad roster. He is greatly serviced by the fact he plays in a division with the Vikings, Lions, and Bears.
Oh my.
Oh my, we extended Kirk Cousins. That is the final tangent I will go on. I don't even want to talk about the Vikings. I am not a fan of what we have been doing. I despise our front office, both the new and the old. And extending Kirk Cousins is just kicking a can down the road. It is the acknowledgement that the Minnesota Vikings will not compete for a Super Bowl for another year. They are too scared to blow it up, even though their defensive talent is rapidly aging, even though their offensive line has been horrible and will be horrible for the foreseeable future, even though their star running back is often injured, even though Adam Thielen is overpaid. They're saying, nah, we're going to try and go 9-8 this year because we got Kirk Cousins, baby. We're going to sneak into the wild card and maybe beat the Saints. If not, oh well. And then we are going to do it over and over again. Just kidding. We can't string 2 winning seasons together in a row. The Vikings offseason is baffling, befuddling, and deeply painful to the fans. Every Minnesota Vikings fan who is not wildly delusional despises Kirk Cousins' presence on this team. Very nice guy, I'm sure. If he dies, he dies, though. And frankly, some Vikings fans are hoping for that at this point.
Well, that feels like it was a bit of a tangent and you pouring out your emotions, Isaiah. I don't even know if you had that one planned out there.
No, I don't have that one planned out, but the Minnesota Vikings, if we want to talk about losers, they're making me feel like a loser. Like, why is a stupid kid at the age of 11 who picked out his favorite team because he likes the color purple and Adrian Peterson still having this much profound effect on an old, depressed man who has to sit here every Sunday and watch his team flub easy wins?
It happens sometimes.
Now, if I had a time machine, there are a few things I'd do. And they wouldn't be very humanitarian, I will say. I'm not going to go prevent any major world conflicts which involve certain groups in Germany. Nothing like that. No murdering babies. I'm going to go slap myself upside the head as an 11-year-old and say, no, you like the Patriots. This Tom Brady guy's pretty cool. But Adrian Peters, no, you like the Patriots. This Tom Brady guy's pretty cool. And then my life will, I'm sure, be much better. Anyway.
That has been this podcast. We've missed, I think, 2 weeks in a row. I apologize for that. Hopefully you guys are still there listening to us on our podcasting platform, whether it be YouTube or Spotify or something else. Let us know what you think. Who are the biggest losers? Who are the biggest winners? Subscribe. I think we're at 255, 256, somewhere around there. And we'll see you in the next one.
Can't wait for someone to call us the biggest losers of the offseason.